So we are sitting with this amount of chaos and uncertainty. It is just not enough to do mental games with ourselves, like cognitive behavioral, like, well, what's the evidence that this terrible thing's going to happen? I'm like, you want some freaking evidence? I could give you freaking evidence. That's not going to work. Like, we need to dig deep and find something. And even if you're not a religious person, like I'm not, but it's more of an existential, humanistic, like this sense of something bigger than myself, some deeper meaning. Hello, and welcome to the Simply Human YouTube channel and podcast. I'm Christina, Caro, licensed clinical psychologist.
And I'm Lynskey, a leadership and self-trust coach.
Today, we are exploring the challenge of living in uncertain times. At the time of this recording, it is February 2025. The United States has ushered in a change in leadership, along with significant increases in uncertainty and unprecedented changes in norms, rules, policies, and institutions. And at the same time, incidences of unprecedented natural disasters are upending the lives of millions of people across the world, and rapid changes in technology and artificial intelligence is creating a lot of uncertainty about what kind of future we're going to have. And there are shifts in geopolitics that's creating a lot of instability and uncertainty. So at a really macro level, we are living in a time of significant change and uncertainty. And then what kind of motivated me to address this today is because I'm just at a personal level really dealing with my own uncertainty. I have, by the way, for those of you on YouTube, I am going to bring a picture up right now. This is my dog, Sophie. She is 15 and a half years old. And right now, my family and I are sitting with that uncertainty you have with elderly dogs, where they're having more bad days than good days. And you have to make this decision of, are they suffering? Do you do the kind and humane thing? Or do you, hope that they rally and maybe give you a few more weeks? So it's a really hard time. I just wanted to give a little shout out to sweet Sophie here. And then all uncertainty is not bad. I'm in the beginning of, those early stages of a possible new relationships. And there's a ton of uncertainty and a ton of fear, but it's still more of a good excitement, even though it is very uncertain. It's scary to go out into the world again and open up your heart and not know if that open heart's going to be reciprocated. This is a time where also I've been sort of in between housing. And during the pandemic, I lost my housing. And so every spring there's uncertainty. Will I find housing? Will I continue to nomad? I have no idea. I've been sitting in this uncertainty now for 3 years and not really knowing where I'm going to land. So Karen, what about you? Are you sitting with some personal experiences of uncertainty?
Yeah, I think all of us are. There's so much of uncertainty in this world. But personally, I'm 60 years old and I was hoping to take on Social Security at 62 or earlier. But there's so uncertainty about what's going to happen because I don't know what the government is going to do. There's also the whole point of I'm an independent contractor, which I've been for about 2.5, 3 years. And I have a great set of clients and some of them work with the government. And as a result, with the government going through some of the changes, I don't know whether or not there'll be stop orders and all of a sudden they say no more subcontractors right now, right? We gotta pay our people, so we can't do subcontractors. So that's a little bit of fear there. I also get worried about, restaurants closing. Like I'm afraid that my favorite restaurants are gonna close, right? Because the grocery prices could go up. We talked a little bit about eggs. I'm like, oh no, I don't want any more restaurants to close because it's my way of getting out and enjoying food. And then also I'm starting a new career. And then I say, why am I starting in 2025? Why did I choose 2025? Well, I didn't know back. I really did not know when I started this whole process of 2025 being my big year of changing, I've decided I'm going to really focus on this whole point about work relationships, because I really feel like I have an expertise in that area and really want to go big with public speaking and creating content and sharing my knowledge that I've worked with clients for so much in the work arena, that I feel like I have something to share. I have a message to share about clarity and curiosity and dialogue. So I'm so excited to get it out there. And I chose 2025 to go all gusto, but there's a little bit of uncertainty there. So I'm so excited to talk about this and about how I've been thinking about it to hopefully help our audience kind of understand, because I feel like I'm in a better place than I was even just back in January. So I'm very excited about this topic as well. So Christina, why don't you tell us a little bit more about why you want to do this episode?
Well, you and I, Karen, before I became a psychologist, we were change management consultants. So we've been working in this field of change and uncertainty for,
ever it feels.
20 years for me, 30 years for you. And I think just feeling so immersed in it right now and listening to the news, there's so much uncertainty going on, particularly, I live in California and we have a lot of undocumented workers here. Our agricultural sector is absolutely dependent on it. And I am hearing so many firsthand stories of just how uncertainty is affecting small business owners, is affecting families. It's just like you were talking about, like uncertainty. Are you going to continue to get contracts? It just seemed really timely because there are things that we can do to build resilience, to be able to live in uncertain times in a way that is not as hard on our mental health and our stress. So I wanted to go ahead and let's talk about some of that and give people some practical skills that they can do and to help build up that muscle of sitting with uncertainty, because I think this is the new norm. And I think we need to kind of prepare for that.
Yeah. And I like it also because honestly, there are days when it first started when I felt so uncertain. I didn't want to get out of bed, and we don't want people not get out of bed. We want to help you get out of bed, face the day, whatever the challenges are or what's happening, to just at least get out of the bed, because everyone's facing this. But as we know, before we jump in, to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and share your thoughts below in the comments or sending an email and notify us via our email address at simplyhuman.connect@gmail.com. And what I wanted to ask you now, Christina, is why does uncertainty feel so threatening? Like, why does it feel so threatening to us?
So if you remember our story of the caveman, so we're going to go back.
Good old caveman. Back to, part of our existence, right? That's how we're hardwired.
Yeah, we are hardwired, because if you think about it, back in the caveman days, back in our gather hunter days, those who could predict where to find food or sense if there was an approaching danger were more likely the ones who survived. If you were just like, I don't know if there's going to be food here, you're probably going to die. So there would be a lot of anxiety around uncertainty. And there's a part of our brain for our survival that sees uncertainty as a threat and then developed adaptations to confront that to maximize our probability of survival. But here's the problem. Like all the times we've talked about the lizard brain and the caveman brain, that when we are operating out of that primitive brain in our modern society, there can be unintended consequences. It isn't always the best strategy. It isn't always effective. Okay. So when we face uncertainty because of that drive to know, like, what I need to know where the next batch of berries is going to be. And nowadays, it doesn't matter whether it's job security, whether it's a loved one's health, or even global events, our brain reacts as if we are facing a physical threat. And in fact, I was talking to a client the other day. She's like, I can't watch the news and I feel this tightness in my chest, and then it starts to spread. And I said, that's distress. Like your heart starts racing. You start going into that sympathetic arousal because the brain is saying, wait, this is uncertainty. This is dangerous. So there's hardwiring there that tells us to respond with a racing heart, with a churning stomach, because there's in some of our episodes we've shared the vagal nerve that tells our stomach and our digestion to stop digesting because we might have to be in a fight with a saber-toothed tiger.
Exactly,
It
exactly.
tells our heart, it puts adrenaline into our heart so we're ready for cardiovascular exertion. Like our body has a certain response, and that's that stress. That's what we all call, God, I'm feeling really stressed out. And this is why a lot of people are having this instinct, like, I need to cut off. You're right, because your brain cannot continually be overloaded with a chronic sense of uncertainty. We are not wired that way unless you actually work to raise your threshold of tolerance for uncertainty. Because the thing that we do to cope is we will maybe make impulsive decisions just to be doing something. We will rush to a false sense of certainty. We'll be more susceptible to believing some explanation that anybody gives us, because as long as it makes it black and white and gets out of the gray, gets out of that unknown, like I'd rather believe something that isn't even true than sit in this not knowing. And so it does make us more vulnerable as a society, because there are people who are more than happy to manipulate that desire, that impulse to go towards certainty or to make those decisions or to simplify what's going on, because then that is how they can have more control. They control us. Listen, for like, this is capitalism. Capitalism controls through fear. If you haven't figured that out, watching commercials about how if you don't use the right toothpaste and your teeth aren't white enough and your laundry doesn't smell good enough and your car isn't jazzy enough, then you're a loser. Then you have somehow missed that fear is manipulated in a capitalist society. And this is part of where it comes to. I don't know what makes me love. So you tell me if I use your toothpaste, I will have a brighter smile and then I'll be safe in the cave. So that primitive fear is exploited all the time, all the time. We
Yeah,
become
I
numb to it.
Yeah, and I like that, what you said earlier, because I think the word is false certainty, right? Like when I thought about me as a new business owner, I really wanted to have control over my life as a new business owner. So guess what? I bought 3 or 4 products. One was a book, one was a course, one was a, like I spent like a lots of money. Oh, Mark, let's do this. I didn't even tell Mark, my husband. I think I just did it because I just knew with certainty it was going to like help me get structured and stuff. And they weren't the right people at the right time. I so much wanted to like have that certainty because they were telling me how they were to help these people, and I just bought into it. It was that fear that just bought me into all of these things, and
Yeah,
I was
here's
just so
the one,
believable.
two, three
Right?
path, right?
Yeah.
Here's
Right. Right.
if you just follow this program,
Yeah.
you
If I
will
just
be
wrote the
successful.
book, I'd have all these clients. If I just
Yeah.
did this on Instagram, then I'd have all these clients. And I was like, okay. And then if I did this on something else, I'd be group. I never thought about like looking for proof or anything because I just so much
Yeah.
wanted that super pill, like the pill that could take me there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's that thing where we gravitate towards wanting certainty because that's like a basic need of ours. And I think that's something that we have to understand. That now, what's interesting is since all uncertainty is all around us now, what can we do? How can we handle this new reality with less stress and more grace?
Well, I'd like to start with sharing some of the really common thoughts
Mm.
from wisdom traditions, because there is actually a lot of helpful guidance on how to navigate troubled times. So when I'm talking about a wisdom tradition, for example, Buddhist psychology. So in Buddhism, there is this concept of impermanence, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Anicca, Anicca, and it is this idea that change isn't just a part of life, but it is life. Every
Mm.
moment
Yeah.
is a new moment. And the
Yeah.
Buddha taught that people
I love
suffer
that.
because they can't accept the reality of the constancy of change. And so we grasp for certainty to get out of our discomfort. And so to alleviate our suffering, we have to learn to accept the truth of impermanence so that we can begin to relax our grip of needing to know everything. And we do that by learning to sit with the discomfort with compassion, acceptance, and curiosity. So it's just in the now, like every breath is the now, and then it's the next breath, and then we take the next breath. And I'll tell you, this is primarily what I'm using, this Buddhist concept of impermanence, but also being in the present moment and dealing with this uncertainty about Sophie, my dog. If I go into the future and start dwelling on the life that I'll be facing without her, I will feel, grief, sadness. I would be feeling grief right now when she's still alive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If I go into the past and I think about all the wonderful things, it still makes me, makes me laugh somewhat, but it also makes me sad because that's not the dog she is today. And I'm not spending that time being present with her right now. So I've been really surprised, actually. I mean, I've been practicing this for 20 years, and I don't think I really realize how strong that muscle has gotten. Like, Karen, you've been texting me every day. How are you doing? How are you doing?
I am.
And I've been like, am I just
Okay.
dissociated? Like,
No,
I'm doing
you are
okay.
like, I'm okay.
I'm okay. But I am just really, really present. I'm just so present these days, just in this moment with her. And right now, she's with me. So why wouldn't I
Yeah.
be okay? But I mean, I appreciate that you've been checking in on me.
You surprised yourself that you had that muscle. But I think what's easy too is maybe it's because, I'm in my parents' house and there's a sense of Buddhism in my parents' house from my grandparents, but we'll just say that. But I think I'm starting to feel a little bit like that, where I learned from something that I spoke to one day about how this tale about this farmer, right? And he would say that when an incident happened, it's not good or bad, it just is. And I think it's interesting about that moment where I'm trying to detach from the moment, right? And just live in the present moment and let it guide me to the next moment and guide me to the next moment.
So there's other wisdom traditions, though, that in Taoism, there's this really cool metaphor of water. So water doesn't fight against obstacles, so it wouldn't fight against this uncertainty, but it flows. It flows around them. It doesn't resist change, and it is the only element that can exist in multiple states. It could be fluid, it could be a solid, it could be a gas. It has this flexibility. And so when we're faced with uncertainty, we can learn to be like water and be flexible and adaptable, strong in our very willingness to flow with the change rather than against it. And then there's
I did not
certainly
know
this
that. Yeah, I love that
and
with the water.
when you study martial arts, one of the martial arts we studied actually each of the elements. So there's certain ways that you move with your opponent that is like water, and how you
Yeah,
flow with
yeah,
what
yeah.
they're
You flow
sending
with
towards
it,
you.
right?
Yeah. But right now, I just really want us to focus on this experience of sitting in the uncertainty, okay, before
Yeah.
we're actually taking
Yeah,
action.
and I also love what you said because it's the sitting, right? That's what I'm trying to say,
Mhm.
because you only divide, you separate the sitting with the action. You don't we always feel like we have to move into an action. It's not about movement. It's actually just sitting first and then separating that from action for a moment. And I think about the Christian's perspective, because I'm a Christian. I was thinking a lot about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the thing for me, Jesus was facing this ultimate uncertainty because he's in a very human moment, and he's so full of anguish because he just demonstrates the ability to stay present with the uncertainty and be able to have this deeper trust. And we all know this as Christians, when not my will, but yours be done. And it's a little bit scary. Your will be done. Which means, it's not I know it's not going to be like mine, but your will be done. And when he speaks this, it is this surrender. And it doesn't mean giving up like we'd usually think about it, but it's in the peace that you got this. It's in the midst of not knowing, but trusting in Jesus. And God, that he's got this. I think that's what is helping me with the uncertainty, because I know that he's got this. Like, he's omnipresent. He's so it makes me feel like somebody's got it, and it gives me hope, right? Seriously, it gives me hope because I don't have to watch what's happening here. I can just deal with what's in my control. So that's what I really loved about my faith. And I've really held on to my faith as well on this. I go to church much more often now, I believe, because there's a need to release that. And so when I am full of of uncertainty or I get scared a bit, then I would go to church. When I just can't do it and get it out of it myself, there's just something for me at the church in the Eucharist. Now, people say I can just pray, and yes, I could, but a church gives us an extraness that I have to go and visit him and talk to him a little bit more and deeper. So it just depends on what practices are good for you. And I think that's
Yeah.
the whole point about the faith. But I got to tell you, too, this gave me a lot deeper faith because of this level of uncertainty that I have right now. I feel like I've gotten closer to God and deepened my faith more than before to the level of uncertainty as well. So, Christina, can I get into some practical approaches? Like, how would you share some of your practical approaches that you share with your clients or that you use on yourself? And I'll share some of mine as well.
Well, I think it's partly what you just said, right? So I have clients who are Christian, and we would talk about how prayer or connecting with their community is a resource for them,
Yes.
because finding support in community is a practice. Because part of what makes sitting in uncertainty difficult is if we feel we are alone in that uncertainty. So we find strength in shared experiences. And when we realize that we're not alone with the struggle, we find that we can hold that space a little bit more because it's this collective experience. So, what you were talking about, Karen, of, yeah, I could just pray at home, but I find more support if I go to church and now I'm surrounded by my community. And if you're not, religious and you don't have a faith community, this means reaching out to your friends, reaching out to family. Because trust me, like I said, I've talked to so many people in this past week who are dealing with one form of uncertainty or another. This is pervasive. Everybody's experiencing it. There can be this tendency to feel like, oh, I'm the only one who's overwhelmed. I'm the only one who can't handle this. Everybody else seems to be doing, I'm looking at their Instagram and, they're going skiing, or well, everyone else seems to be fine. So then we isolate and we think, oh, there's something wrong with me that I can't handle this, or they seem happy, so I don't want to be a downer. So I'm not going to talk to them. Listen, just experiment. Come from that place of curiosity and just say, hey, I'm feeling a lot of uncertainty right now. Do you have uncertainty in your life? And that opens the door for them. Maybe they're masking. Maybe the way they're coping is they're masking. And by you being open and vulnerable and talking about your own experience, which is why Karen and I are sharing with you today, like, we are sitting in multiple aspects of uncertainty. We're trying to role model that we're sharing it to whoever is listening on the internet. So, it isn't going to kill you to
Yeah.
share that you're sitting in uncertainty. Okay, so that's one thing.
Can I add one thing I was thinking about too is uncertainty. It helps me when I get it out because, like, it's what you said. Then I'm not thinking about it and it twirls in my head. And then I can't sleep at night because I just like, and then
Yeah.
the fear gets greater. And then I don't want to get up because I haven't shared it with anybody. And I feel like, I don't know if it's just because I'm an extrovert, as we all
Yes.
know, I'm an extrovert and Christina's the introvert, but that I have to get it out. But it's almost like when I get it out, it allows me to face it and let it go. You know what I mean? So I think it's also getting out of my own head, which is really important of sharing with others too.
Yeah, and for us introverts, where we're not going to necessarily always think to go
Share it.
process with people, but what I find, it's still like worse, right? Because I'm an introverted processor, so my instinct is to twirl around in my head. So I've just been focusing on activities, and this is so the next thing that you can do is just daily routine, daily practices, living your daily life. And for me, when I go outdoors, when I get into nature, that's how I get out of my
That's
head.
lovely.
So I make sure that I do this almost 2 mile walk now that includes going to a local park that's up the street, doing a couple laps in the park, and then it leads to there's a little garden at the top of our street. And I make sure to stop and take a look at the view because I live up on a hill and there's this beautiful view. And because each of those acts, the walking, the feeling the temperature, the feeling the sun. Well, I live in California, so it's sunny here. You might be in a cold climate, so maybe that's not as accessible unless it's a nice day to play in the snow. Because I also live in the mountains and that snow doesn't stop us. If the sun comes out, we go out and play in the snow. But that's all about being in your body in the present moment. And then really intentionally engaging in those day-to-day practices, making a healthy meal, tidying up your physical environment to reduce the clutter and the sensation of stress. Anything that's in your routine, just being really intentional about it, that builds your capacity for being in the present moment. Distinguish between what we can do and what is not in our control. This is something I have to work with people all the time. If you hear should in your head, well, it should be this way. Why aren't they? Why can't I? I should. I would say stop and ask, are those realistic expectations? And do you have any control and influence? Because if the answer is no, then relieve yourself of the shoulding. No, you should do that, but you can't. So this is where the serenity prayer, and again, if you don't know the serenity prayer, I will put the link into it, but the basic thing is being able to know the difference between what's in your control and what you can have the power to change and what isn't in your control, and being able to accept, and then the wisdom to know the difference between the two. I'm not going to cite the whole thing, but the serenity prayer right now, I would suggest everybody has it on their wallpaper, on their phone or their devices, or print it out and put it on your mirror. And then the last thing is, this is a really good time if you haven't cultivated a mindfulness practice. And what mindfulness is choosing where you put your attention. Like Karen said, if she put her attention on all the thoughts that are what ifing, what if they don't get funding? What if I don't get funding? This is all about fantasies and imaginations about the future. If that's where your attention is going and you're choosing to indulge fantasy, you're likely to increase your anxiety. So mindfulness is a practice of recognizing when that's happening and then making a choice to refocus on the present moment. And you use something to anchor yourself, like just the sensation of your inhale and your exhale. You just take a deep breath, you notice the sensation of it, you notice your lungs expanding, you can notice the sensation in your nostrils. And then you exhale and you notice it. And for some people, I'm not talking you have to sit on a pillow and contemplate your navel. When
And do
you
the
integrate,
you don't have to do the
yeah, you don't have to really.
That's what you always
I'm not good
associate.
at that. Yeah, I'm not good at that. I do not like sitting meditation, but what I do enjoy doing is integrating mindfulness into my day-to-day life. So when I go on a walk, I may choose to put my attention on the sounds that I'm hearing. It's a choice for me to be present with my dog right now and to
Right.
give her tons of kisses than to be in my head about what it'll be like in the future. So it doesn't mean that we're not, because like we said, we're hardwired to be in this anticipation, but you stop, you notice, and you make a choice to be in the present moment. And that is mindfulness practice. And I will put a link to a resource for mindfulness meditation, but check with your health insurance company. I noticed that a number are including in your premium that you pay is they pay for a free subscription to the Calms app. And that's like a whole bunch of different guided meditations and ones to help you sleep and all that. If you're just learning, having a guided meditation can be really helpful. And then I encourage you, less than 10 minutes a day. If you do mindfulness practice 7-9 minutes, a couple times, 2-3 times throughout the day, it has been shown to have therapeutic benefits of reducing stress, of lowering blood pressure, of improving sleep, of improving cognition, of building emotional resilience. It has so many benefits. And we're talking, I do it like 5 minutes. You can just say, okay, when I'm at lunchtime or when I'm having my coffee in the morning, I'm going to be really enjoying the smell of that coffee, the taste of the coffee, the feel of the warmth of the cup in my hand. Really treasure those moments because they're really the only thing that we have. And here you are, you're practicing mindfulness when you're just having your cup of coffee.
Yeah. And the more and more I do that, because then I start to enjoy things more. Like there's almost a gratitude to the moment, that warmth of the coffee and how it goes in my throat. It warms me up and I even feel it. It's just very interesting about it.
Brings pleasure. It brings
Yes,
pleasure.
that's what it is. It brings pleasure. And I think that is what's important these days. also trying with the news and things, because the news can also take you different ways based on what you're hearing. So creating stories in your brain about what's going to happen. And sometimes those create where I'm not ready to hear, and then it creates a panic. And so sometimes for me too, it's the ability to be back in the present moment. Like, what can I control? I don't know if that's true or not. I could be curious about it, but I don't have to hold it as truth. And I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah, and this has been an important part of my own journey. Is I'm on the autistic spectrum, so learning to sit with uncertainty. Like, if you know any people on the spectrum, you might have noticed we don't really like uncertainty. We don't like the gray. We want things to be black and white. And when I worked with Karen, I think you're the one maybe who got me that book, The Language of Letting Go by Melody Beattie, because you would say to me, like, Christina, you have control issues. Like you and Greg would say to me, Christina, you have to learn to let go. You have to learn to let go, because I didn't realize it. I didn't know that I was on the spectrum, but I had that black and whiteness. There was this assessment on emotional intelligence competencies. And for me, the very, very, very last one, number 56 out of 56, was comfort with ambiguity, which is just another word for uncertainty. Like I hated it. I hated it. So this is
obviously because you know the number, which I think is so funny. You remember that number.
Oh yeah. I was like, oh, number 50. Because Greg, my former other boss, he made me go. I had political savvy and comfort with ambiguity, my bottom two, and he made me go get coached on it because I was so bad at it. And so in my therapy, and with my wonderful therapist, Roseanne, whenever I would be confronted with not knowing and uncertainty, it caused me so much distress and pain. Like we didn't know why my level of distress and pain was so high, but it just was. And Roseanne's response was like, well, guess you're going to have to sit with it. I was like, what does that even mean? I just hated that so much. But it was over and over and over again. And I trusted her. So I would be like, oh, I hate this. But I would try my darndest. I would try my hardest to just sit with not knowing. And over the years of every single situation, and Roseanne saying, well, I think you're going to have to sit with it, I would literally say, just give me the answer. Just give me the answer. I hated it so much. But at this point in my life, like I said, I don't even think I realize how strong that muscle has gotten. That's, right now I have a lot of uncertainty, like this uncertainty about my housing for 3 years. For 3 years, I haven't known where I'm really going to land. I'm like, well, I'm not a puddle. I mean, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I'm nomading. Oh, I guess I'm going to do a road trip. And it leaves all this space and openness for spontaneity and creativity and new things to enter my life that I never would have expected. Like, I'm a much happier person now, having learned to be in the present, learning to sit with it, learning to stop grasping for certainty, to stop trying to avoid and get out of the pain of uncertainty. Like I'm a much stronger person and much more resilient now. How about you, Karen? I mean, what's your own story in learning to sit with uncertainty?
I remember for the longest time, I wish when I was born, I had one of those scrolls that would say, these are all the things that would be certain in your life. And these are the dates that this would happen, because I so much wanted certainty. Right. And knowing what would happen. Literally, I wish I like wanted that so badly. I forget when I thought about that. I think it was in my 30s when I thought about, I wish I had, so I would know. And I think the thing is, uncertainty is just part of life. But I just think that for me, I hated uncertainty too. Okay. Because for me, I was afraid of uncertainty because I didn't want to fail. For me, uncertainty gave me a better chance of failing at this, failing at that, because I wasn't going to do the right thing. I was like, certainty would give me the right move. And when I had someone who told me to sit in uncertainty, to sit with it. They didn't say uncertainty, they just said sit with it. Yeah. But I'm hyper, as you can tell. I'm moving a lot in our podcast. So it's hard for me to sit with anything. But I realized what sit with it was really understand about what you can control and what you can't control. Now, they didn't tell me that. I had to learn that kind of on my own and recognize the fact that part of that uncertainty is the growth that I have right now is I can sit with uncertainty because I now believe with the faith and some of the other things I've grown into is the fact that it's okay that I don't move and make a decision yet, because maybe it's not time. Like if it was time then I would make a decision. I would know more information that I could make at time. As being able to live in that present moment that allows me to deal with my uncertainty more. And I was kind of thinking about, I think I had that uncertainty for the long term. And that's where I got into trouble, where I want to know the answer, what the end result was, instead of dealing with the fact that all I need to know is what the end answer was. I just need to know what the next step I needed to take. And if there was no next step, it just meant that I would just have to sit in it. And again, sitting is just very hard because we have that hard wiring of wanting to know what's next, what to do next. So until I learned, it's not about failure and changing my ideas about failure and some other things. And the fact that uncertainty is okay because there's so many different, it gives you the avenue of going so many different ways. Like I'm finding the beauty in uncertainty, which I couldn't understand before. The beauty of uncertainty, like you're saying before, because it allowed me to go a lot of different ways. So
yeah, there's a poet that I love that I came across during my dark night of the soul. It's Rainier Maria Rilke. He was a late
oh
19th,
yeah,
early
you
19th
love
century.
him. Yeah.
I did. There was a book called Rilke's Book of Hours, and the translation is Joanna Macy because Rilke's poems are in German. It was really helpful in a lot of the work I was doing in developing sort of my sense of self. But he's written many, many poems, and there's a number of books. And there was a bit of a poem that I came across that I wanted to share that is exactly what you're talking about. In the poem, he wrote, "Be patient towards all that is unsolved in your heart and try to love the questions themselves," which, it is. It's that what you were talking about, that beauty. Can you see the beauty? Can you love the uncertainty? Can you sit in that question and be patient? The reason I think I'm emphasizing more of these wisdom traditions is because I think that that is the part that's bigger than ourselves. When we are sitting with this amount of chaos and uncertainty, it is just not enough to do mental games with ourselves, like cognitive
No.
behavioral, like, well, what's the evidence that this terrible thing's going to happen? I'm like, you want some, I'm sorry, you want some freaking evidence? I could give you freaking evidence. That's not going to work. Like, we need to dig deep and find something. And even if you're not a religious person, like I'm not, but it's more of an existential, humanistic, like this sense of something bigger than myself, some deeper meaning. And if you've ever heard of Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning, that is something also hardwired in humans in his life. He was a prisoner in Auschwitz, and he was observing who was dying and who was surviving. And what he saw was that people who had some connection to something important, something meaningful, something bigger than themselves, those were the people who survived. So that's why I turn to the wisdom traditions, because I do think whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, even if you're atheist, even atheists have a sense of existential humanistic meaning. This is where we need to go. Mindfulness practice is just about being in the present moment, but we need to dig deep and find some really powerful tools and strategies to really help us through this time. So I know we're coming to the end, Karen. Can you kind of help us wrap this up?
Yeah, I do remind people though that, don't go alone. I mean, I'm telling you, when Christina and I talk about this uncertainty and how we're feeling, when Christina asked me about it and then I let her tell me hers, it was just an ability that made us stronger, the ability to create that really deep bond. And I think this is the point that I love about uncertainty. It brings us together because we are built for community. And I think that people will give you ideas and it just allows you to bond with people. I think that's what's really a part about this is it's just being reassured that you're not alone.
And if you are a listener and there's somebody that you know that's really struggling, consider sharing this podcast and this YouTube episode, because we will have these resource links in the notes. So that's how you can help somebody, or for yourself, be sure that you check out these resources for yourself. And what we want to invite you to do is maybe come up with one practice, like I will drink my coffee mindfully, or I will play with my children and be really present. I'm going to put the phone away. I'm going to turn off the TV and I'm going to play with my kids. Just one step in that direction of cultivating mindfulness and being in the present moment. And then over time, you will see that you will start building resilience for living in the times that we are moving into, because it is my sense that this is not short term, regardless of who's in charge. When you have things like climate change, when you have things like we don't know what's going on in technology, artificial intelligence, uncertainty really is going to become the norm. And
Yeah.
so,
A
for
way
your
of life.
own mental health, for your spiritual health, we invite you to really start now. It's never too late. Start now and start developing a practice to help yourself, to help your friends, help your family.
So again, we hope that you would subscribe. I'd love to hear what practice where it'd be like, drinking that cup much more slowly, eating with your spouse and really paying attention, putting away the phones, which I'm doing finally now. Whatever practice you're going to do that's a new practice, we'd love for you to share so we can actually help feed each other with new ideas and things on how to stay in the moment. So if you would like to help us by subscribing, share a comment, do a like, we really would appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And remember, this week, stay curious, stay kind, and we will see you next week.
Bye,
Bye,
y'all.
everybody.